Hey guys, what's going on? So it's been a minute since I've actually uploaded any last training videos. So anyways, today we're going to do something pretty interesting and cool. The world of things like AI and bots and machine learning have obviously been buzzwords for a number of years. And today what I want to do is I want to walk you through how simple it is to actually make your own chatbot. So I'm going to walk you through at a very high level what I've done from a coding perspective. Now, the framework I'm using is something called Rasa. Rasa is an open source framework, competes directly against things like Google Dialogflow or Azure's bot services, or like using something like AWS Lambda. Speaking of Lambda, check out a video that I made on how I use the AWS framework to control my Alexa, which eventually would actually give me information back on my Peloton workouts and progress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through at a very high level what all of this stuff in here is. Um, but before I do that, let me just kick off the bot and let me show you exactly what it's going to be doing. All right, so here's an example of the bot. I've deployed this on a test server for now, so that's why it's showing non-secure. I'm going to be canceling this server anyways. It's a test server. But here's what this bot does. First, it'll do a few things. So you just say hello, and it should greet you back and say, hey, how are you? Um, but really what this is meant to do is to fetch some information on cryptocurrencies. So for example, I can write something like, what is the price of BTC? For those who don't know, BTC stands for Bitcoin in CAD currency. And what it's going to do is running a custom action, and it's going into the background, running an API, and actually pulling this value. So I can say, for example, something like, what is the price of BTC in USD? And the one thing to keep in mind is these are live prices. This isn't something that's been, put somewhere and it's pulling like, once a day. These are, because as you know, cryptocurrency prices change on a daily basis, right? I can even do something like, what is the price for those who are familiar? ETH is Ethereum in USD, and it'll go back and it'll pull that price for me as well. So it's basically 26. And if I, you know what, why don't we just do it again? And you'll see that the price is actually going to change. That basically means that it's a dynamic price. So 26, 28, 60. So it hasn't changed yet. We'll give it a minute because, like I said, they do fluctuate every couple of minutes. But you will notice that the price will change. I will run the command again in a second. But the whole purpose of this is it's a new way of interfacing with the actual platform. So you don't have to, go and run Google queries all the time and run all the searches and all this stuff. Um, it gives you the ability to go ahead and actually, chat with something and get the information you're looking for. See, I wonder if the price of Bitcoin has changed. So what is the price of Bitcoin? So it's 36,060.84, 36,065. So it has changed a bit. Let's try Ethereum one more time. Hopefully it will change. So it did change a little bit. So 26.28, 26.27. So, cryptocurrencies will fluctuate every, couple of minutes, sometimes every couple of seconds as well. So it really depends, but it's actually going and pulling live. The other thing that we can ask it is to say, okay, now that I know that Ethereum is that much, I can go back and say, is this a safe investment? What it's going to do now is it's basically using something called slots. And it knows that the last time that I used any kind of a slot for a cryptocurrency, which I'll walk you through in the NLU model, is Ethereum. It's going to go and say that this asset score for Ethereum is superb with a score of 975. And I didn't have to go and type any Bitcoin name over here or anything like that because it's actually remembering the slot. And that's how these frameworks are set up. I can go back and say, for example, is BTC a safe investment? So now I'm asking specifically for Bitcoin. So I'm going to go back and say the value of Bitcoin. Oh, so it actually hasn't gone ahead and done that properly. Let's try that. So that's where you can retrain the model, right? So what it should actually be doing is going and doing this, but I think I know why, because I was playing around with the model in Rasa X, and that's probably why. But if I do it the other way and I say, what is the price of BTC in USD? And we'll fix this and we'll try it again after, because I know exactly what's happening. Is this safe investment? So now it's going to give it to you for Bitcoin, which is 898 versus Ethereum, which is 975. And that goes back to the stories and the fact that if I were to just go ahead and in that specific story, it didn't recognize BTC as an actual slot, or in this case, as an entity. So we're going to have to go back and correct that, and we'll rerun this stuff again, and I'll show you. But this is just to give you a rough idea, and I can also say something like, I don't know if I actually trained it on this. I trained it on much worse words. We'll see. So that's not, so it wasn't that one, but I did train it on some, curse words, and I said, see if I could find one that I said. So I went down here and I said, hey there. So it's not supposed to do that. That's actually pretty hilarious. And I know why I did that too. So what it should say is, hey, listen, we have a zero tolerance policy, blah. And the reason why this actually said, hey, how are you, is because it recognized, hey there, and and when it's actually classifying this intent, it classified it as a greet as opposed to whatever I called it, cursing. So we can go back and address stuff like that as well. Put in a rule to say, if you see any of these kind of curse words at all, go ahead and do this. But the reason why I wanted to demo this right now is obviously there's some parts that work and some parts that don't work. So let's walk through the code and let's see if we could figure out the areas that don't work. And we'll rerun this model again at the end, the bot again at the end, and actually see if it does what we want it to do. Now, the nice part about this is this entire conversation gets saved into Rasa X, so I have the ability to go back and reference this. So I can go into Rasa X and actually go back and say, hey, when this person said this wasn't the right utterance that you're supposed to give back. It's supposed to be this one instead. So there's ways to correct it, and you update your model. You can do one of two ways. You first start off your model in some kind of an ecosystem like Rasa Core, and then you'll go ahead and go and take that model and put it into Rasa X. What I've actually done is I push this to GitHub, and I have GitHub connected directly to Rasa X. So any changes that I make in my actual ecosystem here will get pushed to GitHub. What I found is that the training between GitHub and this wasn't, when I trained it locally versus training it from GitHub and pushing it to this, it still did make some errors, but that's okay. Like I said, we're going to go ahead and correct it. So let's go ahead and walk through what this actually does and how this bot works. So when you go ahead and start a new Rasa project, and I'm not going to do it here because there's so many other places where you can reference it very quickly. You can go to the Rasa docs. Basically, you're going to go ahead and create some kind of a directory. So I have it in my Rasa directory right there, and I have a couple of bots that I built. Actually, I have one on Home Assistant where I can chat with my bot and control my entire house, the lights, the fans, the fireplace, and everything. Maybe I'll do a video on that later. But this one is really called CryptoBot. And so what you do is you just create a new directory. You're going to go ahead and create a new virtual environment, right? So pip install virtual env, and then you just do virtual env venv. That starts a virtual environment. You're going to install Rasa in there. Like I said, go to the Rasa docs. They're all over there in terms of how to do that. But once you do this, you're going to get a couple of folders. You're going to get actions. You're going to get credentials, endpoints. So basically everything that's over here. The one that you're not going to get is git ignore. I obviously put that in because I don't want to transfer my virtual environment when I push this to GitHub and a couple of other files. The most important files that you'll find in Rasa X are your data files, your models, your endpoint, which is where you're going to specify things like your action server, which we'll walk through later on. And this is probably one of the most important ones, domains, because it holds almost everything. It holds your intents, it holds your responses, what you're going to utter, it holds custom actions, entities that you're going to create, and slots. So slots are the things that actually remember content that you give it, right? So slots are very important. And then forms. Forms basically collect data and then pass it into the slots. And then you just have some general session information here. So let's walk through the file. For NLU, this file is what you're going to predict that a person will start or say basically throughout the chat. So if they say things like, hey there, that is basically the intent of the user is to greet you, right? Is to greet the bot. And these are the kind of things that they can say. And now a lot of this is already pre-trained. coming from the actual Rasa init. It's going to ask you whether or not you want to train it or not, and I say no always because I like using my own stuff. But in this case, I did train it with some of these basic words, and I think it goes up to here. All these I just added afterwards, and you can add in whatever you want. The other thing that I'm going to be, I haven't done this yet exactly, but I will be asking my bot to give me a name so I can start addressing them by their name. Um, if a user goes back and says, "Hey, see you later," like goodbye or have a nice day or bye bye. That basically means that the user is trying to say bye. So all this NLU file is the intent of what the user is trying to say to the bot. So the question then is, where does the machine learning come in? Or where the machine learning comes in is whenever somebody types in something. Now understand that they may not type this exactly like it says in here. So for example, if I go back to greet, they may say, "Hey man." So "Hey man" isn't here anywhere. But if they say, "Hey man," what the machine learning model is going to do is it's going to take that embedding and it's going to say, "Let me predict which intent that user is trying to do based on the sample data that I have here." So was that a greet that they're asking me for? Was that a goodbye? Was that an affirm? What was that? And I mean, you can look into the modeling. It uses a transformer framework, which I'm a big fan of as well. I'll link up a video that I actually did on transformers a couple of months ago, and I actually posted it on towards data science, and I got a lot of great feedback. But basically, I walk you through what the transformer model is in general, and how it differs from things like an RNN and an LSTM, and why the transformer model is preferred. I mean, in this case, what the model is basically trying to do is when it's doing these predictions, it's trying to minimize, or it's trying to optimize for a loss function, and you can watch some of Raza's videos. They do a pretty good job of explaining it, but they're basically total loss that they're trying to optimize against. So that's part one of where the machine learning comes in, is to go ahead and predict the right intent. And a lot of that is going to be based on your training data and then how well you go back and label it after the fact once you've given some real conversations. Rules I don't really use too much. I try not to. That just basically means that if there's a specific intent, you have to have that specific action. And that's really what it is. So there's no machine learning. These are just rules. This is what they say. This is what you do, and that's it. Stories is. We'll come back to stories in a second. The next thing let's go down to is domains. Now, domains have a few things. One is all the intents that you have in your NLU file. You're going to put in your domain file here, basically to let the bot know that these are the specific domains that exist, or sorry, these are the specific intents that exist, and this is what I'm going to predict against. And then for each one of those intents, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to do an utterance, which is a response. So this is what the bot is going to say back to you. So for example, if I predict that the user is trying to greet, I will go back and say, okay, this is what I'm going to respond with because this is what they greeted. And this will start becoming a lot more evident when we start looking at stories. But basically, there's a whole bunch of different ones you can look at here. So when the bot actually predicts the intent, it's going to do one of two things. It's going to go ahead and look at some of the responses you've defined, or it's going to go ahead and look at something called custom actions. And in this case, custom actions is I actually wrote two APIs. One is to go and actually get the crypto prices based on whatever coin currency that I put in. So whether it's Canadian and the actual cryptocurrency, whether it's BTC, Ethereum, Dogecoin, whatever it is, as long as you know the actual symbol, you should be good. And then to go back and get the health index, what does that FCAS stand for, or what is the health of that cryptocurrency? And then along that, what are the entities that I'm actually trying to get out of those NLU statements? So we'll go through entities in a second. But things that I'm trying to pull out of any of those sentences, has anybody referenced a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum, BTC or ETH in this case? Have they mentioned a currency, whether it's Canadian, USD, Great British Pound, whatever it may be? Is there a date mentioned in there? And the reason why that's important is you may want to ask the question, hey, what was Bitcoin's price yesterday? And in this case, you can go back and do a date function, which I haven't done yet, but very, very straightforward to do, especially when you use things like Duckling, which is built into it's not exactly built into Rasa, but you can run a Docker container for that as well. And then did I actually catch their name? And then slots are things that I want to remember, right? So cryptocurrency, basically it's the text. Influence conversation is, does that slot impact any of the future conversations? And I also have currency, and then I have name as well. Um, and then forms. This is the data. So this form I didn't actually end up using, so I'll just blank that out. But basically, what am I collecting in the information in those forms? So I'm collecting anything that has an entity crypto and anything that has an entity currency. So let's now look at what that means, entity. So if I go back to my NLU model and I scroll down, when I'm actually giving the examples, so get crypto price, the example I'm saying is how much is BTC. Now BTC is an entity of type of crypto. So crypto is the actual entity, and then BTC is the value, right? Date is the actual entity, and then today is the value. Another example is what is the current price of Ethereum, right? And that's crypto. Now, in this case, what I wrote is I wrote out Ethereum. I should just write out ETH because the other thing that I have to do for this to work is to say if they actually say the full name like Ethereum, I have to have a lookup table that says Ethereum refers to ETH because that's how the API is written. Then I also have Dogecoin. I have yesterday. I have BTC as a crypto. Now I have currency, which is the actual entity, and then CAD is the value, and so forth. So this is how you would actually start training your model against identifying what are entities and what are values. And then same thing down here. When I actually say go ahead and get the health index, I will change that to Dodge. And then you can give different ways of writing BTC, whether it's with a capital T and then TC small tc, all basically to give it some idea to say, listen, you can say this entity multiple ways. I can also go back into the command and just lower everything into the actual API. Multiple ways to do it, but here's another way to do it. And then explain what FCAS is, right? So a user may come back and say, what is FCAS? What does FCAS mean? And for each of those, we have a specific answer. So let's look at explain FCAS. When I go back to my domain files, anytime that we're talking about explain FCAS, which is right there, it's basically going to respond with this. Anytime when I go back into my NLU model and talk about get health index, and I go back to my domain files, it's actually going to reference this action health index. And you may be asking yourself, well, how does it know whether to go after one of these standard responses or go into actions? And that's where you get into your stories. So when we scroll down and we start looking at things like get crypto index, the first thing is it's going to go ahead and say, okay, if the intent is to greet, I'm going to greet them back. Next, they may say, hey, listen, I want to go ahead and find out the health index. You're going to then spark up a form, and the form is going to collect the relative data from that conversation. So again, the form in this case is right there. It's going to go ahead and collect the crypto entity, and it's going to go ahead and collect the currency entity. And then once it's done that, it's going to say, all right, I'm going to go and run this custom action. So action health index. And I'll show you how that's a custom action in a second. It's going to utter did it help. You're going to affirm yes, and you're going to say goodbye. I mean, you can add more to this and say, that's great. Thanks for confirming. Is there anything else I can help you out with? Blah, blah, blah. You can do a whole bunch of that stuff. Okay, so now it's going to go ahead and in this case and say, I want that custom action, right? Like we said in the story, which is called action health index. So I'm going to go to my actions folder. And don't worry about this error. I have no idea why it's probably something the way I wrote stuff, but it works, so it doesn't matter. So this is where you have now a class. And you have in your custom actions, you're going to have a class, you're going to have the name of the custom action, a static method that's going to go ahead and collect the different entity values, and it's going to put those in slots. And then finally, you run your API. But we wanted the one that said, if I go back to stories, the one that said action health index. So how does it know? So the way it knows is it goes here and it actually says in return. So this action health index is how it knows to go and get a custom action, right? Based on what we wrote in the domain file. It's going to go there. It's going to say, okay, right now my slots are empty. The user hasn't given me any data on what they want. For key in crypto and then currency. So basically we're saying from that form, we're collecting crypto and currency. And if there's a value, let's go ahead and append it and let's return those slots. And here, basically the custom action that or the API that I wrote is to say, let's go ahead and unpack crypto and currency from this tracker. So I'm basically going ahead and pulling this function here, slots, return slots. And then I'm using Alpha Vantage. I'm sure you guys are aware of Alpha Vantage, very, very popular. And I'm returning it saying, well, you can just go to Alpha Vantage and get an API key. I mean, here's one. I'm going to trash this anyways at the end of this, but the API keys are free. So you go ahead and run it. You pass in the API key, you pass in the symbol, and the symbol is basically coming from what the user said that they want to look at. So in this case, crypto is going to get passed. So crypto/value is going to actually pass the symbol. And then once you do that, it's going to go ahead and return a whole bunch of data. It'll give you the symbol, the full name, the FCAS rating, and the score. And the response it's going to give you is this. The fundamental crypto asset is blah, 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 blah. It's going to give you the full name of the actual cryptocurrency, the actual symbol, the rating, and then the score. And so that is basically how you run this. And this is a very, very straightforward API. You can run APIs that pull into databases. You can pull APIs that run further machine learning models, which I've done as well in the past. So several ways you can actually play around with this. But let me show you how this actually works if you were to train this within Rasa X, or Rasa Core, I should say. So we're going to go ahead and open up this virtual environment. So I'm just activating the virtual environment. Okay, great. And now I'm also going to open up a side window here and do the same. And the reason is because I need to run my action server locally in order for it to actually run these custom actions. So let's go ahead and say Rasa shell. And what Rasa shell is going to do is it's going to go ahead and load the latest model, which would be that one right there. And based on that, it's going to ask me to go ahead and interact with it. And on this side, we're going to say Rasa run actions, and this runs my action server. And the action server basically is this file running at an endpoint right here. So you're going to have to uncomment action endpoint, and then that's basically it's running on localhost 5055, which is what this is. And so now here, if I just go back, let's go back to the NLU file, I can say, hi, how are you? And, obviously it's not, because for whatever reason, it's not returning the right value. So I can say, what if I write, hey there? That should be a complete match. Hey, how are you? Okay. So, I mean, we can go back and fix this within this tool as well. Now remember, I didn't do an extensive amount of training. I just trained it on the APIs and that's it. I didn't care about too much about the intents of the greetings and stuff like that. So how much is BTC in CAD? So it go ahead and returns that value. See if it changes again quickly or not. Yep, so it did. So BTC looks like it's a little bit more volatile. It changes quite a bit. And say, is this a safe investment? So the fundamental crypto asset score is that, blah, 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 blah. Let's swear at it. So now it actually picked it up here, right? But I mean, in the other one, I can say, this is what I wrote. And it's going to pick up the hey there instead, right? So this is again the way that you test it. Now, if you wanted to go ahead and change it, you can go ahead and say stop, and then you can say something like Rasa interactive, and so it's going to run, and so it's running the diet classifier, which is like that. Like I said, it's the transformer architecture, which is really cool. So again, it looks like it's actually training because it may have learned something new. I don't know. This is actually hooked up to my GitHub, so I wonder if this actually, the GitHub was updated and pushed something back here. I'm not 100% sure, but like I said, this is for testing purposes, so it's all good. So the nice thing about Rasa Interactive, and you can do this in Rasa X as well with a user interface, but the nice thing about Rasa Interactive here is you can start confirming whether or not it's actually classifying the right endpoints or not, or the right intents or not. So let's try this again. Hey there. It's going to say basically it's classifying this as the intent greet. Hey there, no entities. Is this correct? Yes. Bot wants to run other greet. Yes. And they want to start listening again. Yes. So now we can say hey there and swear at it. So this is an intent greet. No, it's not. So this is actually cursing. There's no entities or values in this. Bot wants to run utterance cursing, yes, and the bot wants to utter yes, and then bot wants to listen, and we're going to say no. I don't want the bot to listen again. So I'll have to create a new action. I just realized that basically shuts down the chat once you swear at it or something like that. Or maybe I'll give it a, maybe one or two opportunities. Maybe the person's really upset. Who knows? They can't. Their cryptocurrencies are tanking, so they're really upset. Who knows? I don't know. Anyways, so we'll go back and listen. It's fine. So now let's go back and say, hey there. And so now it's the intent. Oh, I've got to retrain it. I forgot. Nope. Cursing. Okay. Then we can say how much is BTC in CAD. And they basically say that, hey, listen, I want to run these entities and these values. So, yep, all good there. Yep. Action and crypto prices, yes. And then we do want to utter yes and then listen. And then we're going to say, is this a good investment? Health index, yes. Yes. And so what I'm basically telling it is it's confirming with me everything that it wants to say. So I could say now, is ETH a good investment? So it's saying that ETH is a crypto, is a good investment. Should I run get health index? And the answer to that is yes. So if you notice when I ran it actually in the UI, it didn't recognize that. The bot wants to run yes, and then action health yes, yep, and yeah. Okay, so let's stop. And we're going to export all of that stuff. Cool. And now we're going to run Rasa train. So I'm going back and saying all the stuff that I've actually done. Let's go back and retrain this. Once I've retrained it, then we can push that model up into the UI, and we'll see how it works. But we're going to first test it here to make sure that it actually works properly. All right, so let's go ahead and run Rasa shell again, now that it's trained on the new model. So just have to remember to push 714 into the actual UI. We'll do that in a second. Probably do that through GitHub. Okay, so let's say hi there. Okay, so now you see it actually has gone ahead and picked up the right utterance. We're going to say what is the price of BTC in USD? Is this a good investment? So it's picked up BTC as the entity, which is good. And now we're going to say, is ETH a good investment? And so now it's actually gone ahead and done. So this is great. And I'm going to say, what is the price of ETH? Notice I'm actually not going to say in USD because it should remember this in USD already. So that's the price. Now I can say, I shouldn't say how, but what is the price of ETH in CAD? Okay, let's see what I'm not sure why that. What is the price of ETH in CAD? Okay, so dud. I'm not sure what happened there. I wrote ETG, that's why. So I need to write some kind of another loop statement here that says if it doesn't belong to one of those cryptocurrencies, say, I don't understand what you're talking about. Can you repeat yourself? So that's an easy fix. We can do that. I'll probably do that offline later on. But the whole purpose here is to say, it now recognizes CAD as a second entity. So now, without having to specify the CAD again, I can say what is the price of BTC. And it should remember this in cat as well now, because that's what the slot is filled with. So now that we've done this, I'm going to push this up to GitHub. So let's go ahead and stop this because this is the model that I want. And then we're going to run it in the UI again. And that's going to give you an idea of how simple it is to actually build some of these things. I mean, I also get asked this question is to say, we have all these companies that are open sourcing these tools for chatbots. Why are they doing that? I mean, aren't they giving away their IP? And the truth of the matter is, the algorithms they use, like the diet or the transformer framework, is open source, right? That's a very well known model or architecture. If you just use regular bag of words, or whether it's whatever the NLU frameworks there is out there, there's so many of them, right? Um, it doesn't matter because those frameworks are open source. The real IP that comes out of this, and this is where companies will then start locking that data, is the actual training data, right? It's really this file right here, this model file is their IP, because that contains the training data, the label data in this case. It also contains what are you fixing along the way, like how we fix certain things, and it's also looking at the stories. How are we actually going to go ahead and do this? This here is the IP that an organization really owns. It's not the technology. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This model file is probably one of the most important files when we're looking at this. And it's always specific to a use case as well. You generally don't want to have a model go on and reference the world and everything. Like you have these voice assistants like Alexa or Google or whatever, or Siri. They're really good at general tasks, but they're not good at specific tasks, right? When you're going to go ahead and train a bot on a specific task, it becomes an expert in that task, and that's really what the bot should be doing. You don't want it to go and talk about cryptocurrencies and order a pizza and tell you what the weather is and wherever, and then come back and talk about that's not the intent of it. So I just want people to walk away with the fact that the IP really sits in the models here. Okay, so let's go ahead and upload this to GitHub, and then we're going to go ahead and rerun the UI, and then we'll close this out. All right, so to get add, get add. So I'm basically adding everything here. Get commit second push. Okay, so I'm gonna leave it still at the master branch. I'm not gonna touch that. So I'm just gonna say get push origin on the main branch actually. Make sure you have the correct access rights. That's because I can't spell origin. Okay, so now what it's doing is it's pushing all of this stuff to my GitHub. And this is a private repository that I've got. Let me just do a little bit more testing on it, then I'll open it up eventually. But while this is running that, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into Rasa X. And let me show you what that looks like. So Rasa X, you can look at the docs in terms of how to set it up. It's fairly straightforward. Let's just go ahead. This is the IP that I have. It's basically, just like I said, a dummy server I'm using for now. And here is where we do a lot of the talking to the bot, right? So all these conversations that we just had there, like as I was demoing this to you before, this is that conversation. So this is the conversation I had with a tester, and that was me. This is the conversation we put together here. And as it's doing this, you can actually go back and look at that conversation and correct certain things. So I can go back here if I wanted to. So where is that? Where I call the bot a bad name, right there. And it says, hey, how are you? I can actually go in here and correct this and say that right now this actually says that it's an utter greet. It's actually not an utter greet. You can go ahead and actually fix that. So you can copy this into interactive learning, this entire dialogue, and then go back and fix that and say, no, that wasn't an utter greeting, that was something else. I'm not going to do that here because I've already got the model pushing from GitHub, so I don't want to have two models doing that. But let's see if it's ready. And I have the dev branch here. Oops. That's where I got to push it. So that's probably why. So I will go ahead and connect this actually to the main branch and not the dev branch. So we'll go ahead and connect this to main. Okay, so now I'm connected to the main branch. Great. So that's what I wanted. Let's go back and see. So this has been pushed. let's go to GitHub and just verify that it does say second commit. And so not everything, but certain things that get the second push, which is about 3 minutes ago. Because I only really changed a few things. I didn't change the action server. All that stuff stays the same. Didn't really touch the endpoints. Yep, so this is perfect. Exactly what I wanted. So anyways, so now that it's done that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to feed this bad boy the new model. So we're going to say update model. And I'm going to train it based on the GitHub. So it takes a couple of minutes for training to get done. So I'm going to speed this up a bit. Now there's a couple of other ways to do this as well while it's training. I can just push the model through an API that's built into Rasa X. I really like Rasa X. It's a really cool framework. It just the only thing that I would say about Rasa in general is while building the bot, doing all the work in the background is not the complicated part. Where the complexity really comes is sometimes using the framework. Like Rasa in itself, it's got a backend that runs locally. Then it's got a Rasa X that needs to run on an always on server. Then you have Rasa, Duckling if you want to use that runs in Docker. Then you have other things that run in Docker. I mean, they've tried to simplify it as much as possible, which is great. But that's kind of where I think there's a bit of a learning curve still. So this is the one that we just pushed right now. So we're going to go ahead and make this one active and the other one's inactive. So let's go ahead and talk to our bot. Let's say, and this time I'll run it through the actual interactive learning so you can see it. So we'll say, so it's actively listening. It's going ahead and using the model. It's learning. In a few seconds, it's going to reply. And then the replies do get faster, which is good. So it doesn't always hang like this. Or maybe it just doesn't like me at all. Okay, so it's saying something. So there you go. We have a 0, so perfect. It picked up that last time it didn't. We're going to say, how much is BTC in CAD? Okay, so the value is that. So along the way, it's actually saying these are the entities that I'm picking up. And this is what I'm predicting. And it's saying 100%, I'm confident this is what it is. Did that help? I'll say yes to that later. Is this a good investment? So it gives me the asset score for BTC. Great. Is ETH a good investment? Now remember, last time this screwed up on us, it gave us the price, so hopefully it works. Perfect, it does work. Then I can say, how much is ETH? And it should already remember that I said CAD because it can see on the side here. Let me just close this up. It already has these slots pre-filled, so it remembers that. Okay, so it gives me the price in ETH, and then finally, what is the price of ETH in USD? Okay, that's the price. What is the price of BTC? She gave me the price in USD. Amazing. So everything's working. So just so you guys don't think that I've only programmed USD and BTC, let's try, I don't know, Great British Pound. So what is the price of BTC in Great British Pounds, GBP? So the only thing it's got to do is we'll have to figure out how to code that symbol. Again, that'll probably be something we can put as a lookup value in the actual custom action. Did that help? Yeah. What is the price of ETH? All right, so there you go. So this is a good way. And again, if you want to go ahead and share this with your friends, and this is how you would start getting more and more data on this, you can go to conversations, you can go to share with guest testers, put in whatever you want here, generate that link. And then when I put that link in a browser itself, this is what the users would see, is they would see what we saw. So we would have to, because this is recognizing my IP, it's got the previous chat here. I'd have to clear this out. But regardless, that is how you run Rasa X. Like I said, pretty cool framework. You can even automate your models as well. So as you update your models, you can push that through GitHub Actions, and that will automatically update things in the back. Rasa has, I would say, pretty decent docs. So go through the docs. There's some good helper videos as well, but honestly, the best way to learn this is just get cracking and just get coding, and that's really what I did. Oh, and I forgot to mention, you can always then take this model and then put it into credentials, and now you can start integrating it within your Facebook, within your Slack, within your whatever other integrations you have. Very straightforward. You can just put whatever that integration is. If that integration doesn't exist, I'm not sure if you do, but I think you may need to go and create your own custom integration, which isn't too bad to do. But you can put this on your own website. So a lot of options with this, and the UI is nice. It's clean. I like it. The color scheme is very nice. The predictions are pretty good, and you can go ahead and do a lot more what I'll call hyper parameter adjustments. You can go into your, I think it's in your config somewhere, and start looking at the different types of pipelines, and fine tune other things here as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll talk to you again later. Bye bye.